Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Mike McClure, and I'm a member of the Oracle Autonomous Database Product Management team. I'm joined by my colleague, Michael Murch, and today we're going to talk with you about how to optimize business transformation with the Oracle Database Cloud. Now, business transformation in this presentation is just an umbrella for a whole bunch of stuff that you're working on. The reality is CIOs are working on a number of initiatives, and some of them are transformative and others are evolutions, but they're no less important. This is a recent study on CIO priorities. Let's take a look at these. You got IT modernization, digital transformation, cybersecurity, business analytics, customer experience. All of these are fundamentally about data. Their success is dependent upon the timely extraction of information from your data, the protection of your data, and the platform upon which that data resides. You know, in many ways, data is your most valuable capital asset. It's just as important, if not more important, than the buildings you buy, the data center that you run, the office equipment you bought, or even the computers you run your systems on. So when designing initiatives and systems based on your most valuable capital asset, if you want to get the most value out of your efforts, you've got to think about optimization from the beginning. Optimization should be a fundamental design tenet, a philosophy of efficiency. We all recognize this graph, right? It's the relative cost to repair at different stages of a system's lifecycle. We know that it's exponentially more difficult and more expensive to fix problems the further you get into a system lifecycle. And this holds true whether you're responsible for a single solar system, just one little microservice, or if you're responsible for a galaxy like an entire department's microservices, or if you're responsible for the entire universe of all systems spanning your enterprise. The only difference is whether or not the cost of the repair is on the order of thousands, tens of thousands, millions, or tens of millions of dollars. And this concept isn't specific to bugs. For example, security. If security is an afterthought, your system isn't going to be as secure. For the most secure systems, you have to include security into the fundamental fabric of your data design tenets. Because if you don't, the cost of retrofitting security to meet the evolving requirements will be tremendously expensive if it's even possible at all. For example, you may use a technology that meets the security requirements at the time the app was built, but then some new regulation comes up or some new data is needed in the application that happens to be PII or whatever. Well, if the technology you use to build that app doesn't support those new security requirements, then the best case scenario is it'll be really expensive to fix. And in the worst case, it'll be impossible. The point here is, just like security, if you design with optimization in mind, you'll have a more optimized system. That makes sense, right? Whatever choice you make today, think not only about the short-term entry point, but what those choices will mean over the long term when you're operating your entire enterprise application universe at scale. Because it's very different to manage 5 or 10 heterogeneous systems than it is to manage 100 or 200 or even 1,000 heterogeneous systems. Gartner and other industry analysts recognize the problem of scale in the open source world. With legacy systems, this wasn't as big of a deal because with legacy application development, you had monolithic, vertically scaled applications, which really meant fewer actual databases to integrate. In a cloud-native, horizontally scaled, data store encapsulated microservice world, you could have hundreds or even thousands of data stores with many different kinds of data that you have to spend time integrating. They recognize that about 50% or more of the time and cost of managing these disparate data stores is spent on integration. That's 50% of your people's time focused on integration instead of the innovation that creates competitive advantage. In fact, Gartner now has enough of a sample size in their surveys to create financial models where they've determined that because of the significantly higher operational and integration costs of open source systems, the break-even point between commercial platforms and open source is approximately 3 years. Further, they're predicting that by 2025, 50% of the independent DBMS vendors out there will fold, and customers will be forced to migrate back to commercial data management platforms, and that's going to cost them. That's where Oracle's perspective of the converged database comes into play. A converged database is a multi-model, multi-workload, multi-tenant data store that supports virtually any type of data you can generate. Our belief is if you subscribe to the converged database philosophy, you'll optimize all those initiatives that you're working on that involve data because your teams will have time to focus on innovation instead of integration. Now, convergence from multiple platforms to a single platform, it's a universal pattern that's repeated itself throughout history. Convergence makes life simpler and more integrated. Back in the day when you wanted to listen to music, you had an iPod or Zune. If you wanted to go somewhere, you had a GPS or a map. For pictures, you had a digital camera. You carried a flip phone, an appointment book, all in a big backpack or briefcase or something. Now you carry an iPhone. Moving photos and music between devices, fumbling through the pages of an address book, heck, even sending a photo via email took a bunch of inefficient integration activities back in those days. Now with an iPhone, the various disparate platforms that as purpose-built devices didn't talk native to each other back in the old days, they converged into a single, more efficient platform that shares data from one application to another. You take a photo, attach it to an email or text, distribute it, schedule an appointment, include GPS directions to the attendees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. From a day-to-day operational efficiency standpoint, there's just no comparison between 6 or 7 devices and a single device. Sure, sometimes you need that highly specialized camera or GPS or satellite phone because a specific use case requires it, but those are exceptions and not the rule. This convergence example translates directly to the data management platform world. You should be designing based on convergence, only deviating for highly specialized use cases, so you minimize your integration efforts and you optimize your overall enterprise application universe. While it may appear cheap or easy at the outset, the reality is that relying on all of these single-purpose open source databases is vastly more complex, significantly more expensive, and much more difficult to maintain. And it also exposes more attack vectors to breach your security defenses. Systems integrations custom built, you have no operational economies of scale, versions across your building blocks are constantly changing, so you're forced to continuously reintegrate, retune, and troubleshoot. On the other hand, the Oracle Converge database platform unifies all your data in the best possible way to maximize the value of your data capital while still providing application developers the flexibility to use whatever tools and languages they want to use. Now let's talk about this in a little more detail and why this is a problem. There's a misalignment between data and application architecture. Here we have a bunch of different applications created to solve specific problems, and the development teams have chosen whatever data store they want to use to build. They want to write their apps in whatever they want to write them in, and they want to deploy those apps in Kubernetes. So we've got some MongoDB, Postgres, MySQL, Neo4j for Graph, Hyperledger for blockchain. All these different data stores were chosen by their developers without thinking about the impact their decision has on the overall value of the company's data capital. All they care about is solving the specific problem they were tasked with solving. The value of the company's data capital isn't a first-tier concern for them. Now, if your data is one of the most valuable, irreplaceable, and untapped capital assets your company has, then why are application development teams who are focused on solving localized problems dictating how your corporate data capital will be stored, maintained, and managed? To me, that's like the tail wagging the dog. I'm not saying that developers don't want to do the right thing for the company. I'm just saying that as developers, to solve the problem they're tasked with solving, they prioritize application centricity and developer ease over data centricity and data capital value. And that disconnect sets into motion an environment that's really a brewing storm and growing, right? It'll ultimately limit access to potentially valuable information contained within your data, devaluing the data capital through fragmentation. It's like a tsunami. Locally at the point of the earthquake, you don't see a wave, but that doesn't mean that it's not there. Nobody sees it, but it's rolling 500 miles an hour just below the surface, picking up steam until hundreds of miles away down the coast or across the ocean. It turns into a great big wave that comes crashing down and everybody has to deal with it. So what do I mean about fragmentation? How does the fragmentation erode the value of your enterprise data capital? Well, let's look at this. Each database supports different data types, and they store their data in different formats that aren't natively compatible, just like that iPhone purpose-built device example, where devices didn't originally talk to each other natively. They require some sort of CDC, ETL, or other integration to aggregate or analyze across the data stores. Each database requires developers to connect using their proprietary APIs and transaction models. Developers on one application have to change gears when working on another application that uses a different data store. Analysts need to understand the differences in the raw data. From a management perspective, each single purpose database requires different skills to manage them, different ways to patch security, upgrades. The timing of the software patch release cycles will differ for each data store, making things more complicated. From a security perspective, each single purpose database has different and often primitive security models. In some of these, you've got to grant root type access just to use or manage them. Security and governance is different across the data stores. Security policies will differ for every database, and even auditability differs across data stores. From an availability perspective, the DR and business continuity models and capabilities will be different. The runbook procedures that your ops teams will use in a DR scenario will be different for each data store. That situation is ripe for failure under the pressure of a DR or BCP event. And some of these purpose-built databases confine you to a single cloud. Others may be deployable across multiple clouds, but they aren't terribly good at replicating data across clouds or on-premise. All this fragmentation leads to a fundamentally brittle system. And why would you want to build a brittle system? Certainly, this is not the way to optimize the benefits of the efforts that you're putting into your corporate initiatives. And it's certainly not the way to maximize the value of your data capital. Now, let's look at the same scenario with the Oracle converged database philosophy in mind. Multi-model and multi-workload, supporting all of the different data types with all of the different application workload profiles. Multi-tenant, we manage all of these databases in a single Oracle container databases. Many databases managed as one, all while maintaining the same security model, auditability, governance, upgrades and patches on a unified schedule, consistent APIs that developers use regardless of what data type they're using, DR and BCP strategies and runbooks for recovery across all of the services. Data integration becomes easier because all the data is stored in the same way. And all that fragmentation that we talked about in the previous slide, poof, it's just gone. But yet, for the application developers, they can still focus on building cool stuff that gives you competitive advantage instead of maintaining and managing and integrating data. That 50% of the time that Gartner estimates would be eventually be putting into integration can now be focused on innovation. And they still get to use the same tools and languages with the same cloud native APIs that they used in the fragmented data architecture example. And they can still deploy their apps with Kubernetes or any other way that they want to do it. So now that you understand how Oracle's converged database philosophy optimizes your data capital rooted initiatives that transform your business, now we can talk about how Oracle Database Cloud optimizes your converged database platform. The Oracle Database Cloud is the best and most complete database as a service offering available. It provides you with multiple options that enable you to meet the requirements of any system. We have the very price competitive database cloud service that lowers the total cost of operations for cloud databases by up to 45%. We've got the highly differentiated Exadata Cloud Service offering that saves up to 50% on total TCO with a 3 to 8x performance improvement and can be deployed in the Oracle Cloud or on-premise in the form of Exadata Cloud at Customer. And we've got the leading edge autonomous database offering that can reduce the operational costs of your Oracle Converged Database platform by up to 90%. By offering this complete portfolio that meets your various price to performance workload criteria, we can give you the ability to choose the right tool for each job so you can build both the top line growth and your bottom line savings. And we actually have multiple options for the autonomous database depending on your workload. Our autonomous data warehouse is geared towards analytics and machine learning workloads. Very large self-managing databases with a significantly lower total cost of ownership. The autonomous transaction processing database is best for business applications and mixed workloads with huge performance advantages over other cloud databases. And our autonomous JSON database offering is even cheaper than some of the open source databases if you include the cost of enterprise support. Regardless of which Oracle Database Cloud offering you use, you can support nearly any application requirement without sacrificing security and governance controls. And these just aren't our claims. Let's take a look at what analysts say. Here's an example of a workload based on surveys of different companies across various industries. Represents a large enterprise workload they used as a migration model for comparing the costs of AWS's RDS Oracle service and the Exadata Cloud Service. In AWS, they used 90 databases. In Oracle Cloud, they only needed 45 databases deployed on the Exadata Cloud infrastructure running the Exadata Cloud Service. In Oracle, they required less than half the core count, 576 to 200, and required less memory, but they got more storage and 40 times the IOPS, which, as you know, is key for database performance. In AWS, this compute and storage mix for this workload migration would cost about $1.3 million a year. With the Exadata Cloud Service, you get so much more storage and IOPS for 1/3 the cost. The AWS Cloud, less functionality, more outages, more downtime, 2 to 3 times more expensive. And then the analysts compared RDS Oracle to the autonomous database transaction processing version in OCI. And they determined that RDS Oracle required 33% more vCPUs than on-premise best in breed. And compared that to autonomous transaction processing, which actually required significantly less OCPUs than running the best of breed systems on-premise. And this is a complete cost comparison starting in year 3 from a purely long-term operations perspective after migration costs are spent. Across the board, every aspect of running an Oracle database, the autonomous database costs less to own and operate, resulting in a lower TCO. In particular, notice this red slice, how much smaller it is. That's for outage. The cost of outages with autonomous, those costs are reduced between 2.5 and 5 times. These gray slices across all these, those are database maintenance costs that are also significantly lowered with the autonomous database. And it's not just the analysts who see these advantages. Our customers are adopting Oracle Database Cloud in different flavors for different workloads. Grupo Bimbo, a $15 billion multinational company, migrated on-premise backend systems to the low-cost database cloud service. Specialized Bike moved their EBS database to Exadata Cloud Service, got improved performance, implemented DR that they didn't previously have, and still saved nearly $1.4 million over 3 years. 7-Eleven moved their core ERP and back office applications into OCI in 13 weeks. And they created a disaster recovery environment in the cloud that delivered performance 30 times faster while saving $3.5 million a year. Alliance Data moved their apps that run their business, 30 databases, 25 terabytes of data to the Exadata Cloud Service and saved $1 million a year as a result. And because they recognize that the autonomous database will optimize their environment even further, they're right now expanding their usage into the Oracle Autonomous Database. Unicommer consolidated 17 countries' data from 60 on-premise systems to Oracle Autonomous Database, and not only saved 40%, but also were able to support a 300% increase in the number of analytics queries globally. They got information from their data that they didn't previously have. Now, that is a perfect example of how Oracle Database Cloud optimizes a business analytics initiative and maximizes the value of their data capital. More information, faster, enabling the business to more rapidly act at a significantly lower cost. And look, I've got example upon example upon example of these kinds of successes that our customers have experienced, moving all kinds of workloads to the Oracle Database Cloud. But I just don't have time to talk about any more of them. If you're interested in hearing more, I'm sure your sales rep would be happy to arrange those conversations. So we talked about the Oracle Converged database running on the Oracle Database Cloud and how that can optimize your business transformation initiatives. But if we look one step deeper at the whole of OCI across the globe, you'll see even more opportunities for optimization. Oracle is the only company in the SaaS application business that's also in the infrastructure as a service business. The world's most comprehensive SaaS portfolio, extended by a broad suite of PaaS services that reach across the hybrid and multi-cloud architectures, all powered by the most secure, highest performing, most cost-optimized IaaS cloud in the world. Our second generation infrastructure cloud was built from the ground up with enterprise requirements in mind. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure is optimized for enterprise workloads, consistently high performance, excellent reliability, security implemented by default, and it powers everything at Oracle. And while we believe that you should run your database and application stacks in our second generation cloud, in the spirit of the converged database discussion and letting developers use the languages and tools that they want to use, we've got 8 regions directly connected to Azure data centers, which allow you to keep your optimized data capital in OCI while allowing you to develop and deploy your applications in Azure. The reality is that we know that multi-cloud is the new normal. A majority of enterprises that we talk to today want to have or already have a multi-cloud strategy. And though we have the Azure Interconnect, we also have the ability to do similar connections to other clouds. So you can design an architecture that retains the data management optimization of a converged database in the Oracle Database Cloud, while at the same time giving you the flexibility to build your apps anywhere in any cloud. So now my colleague, Mike Murch, is going to talk you through a little bit about our multi-cloud offering and some of the customers that are taking advantage of it. Mike, I'll pass you the baton and you can bring us home.
Well, thanks, Mike. My name is Mike Murch. I'm a product manager on the Exadata team, and I've been focusing on multi-cloud deployments for our database services. When we take a look at some of the industry trends that are going around in terms of multi-cloud, these 3 data points really stood out for me. The first being, and this is taken from the Flexera State of the Cloud report dated March of 2021. The first being that during COVID-19, companies responded that they were aggressively moving more of their workloads into the public cloud. Of close to 30% total respondents said we are significantly increasing the amount of the plans to move workloads into the public cloud, with about 60% saying we slightly increased it. Very little are decreasing their plans. So more and more companies are becoming comfortable moving, accelerating their plans to move to the public cloud. This has also seen a growth in multi-cloud scenarios. A full 76% of respondents said they are using multiple public clouds and at least one private cloud. But 15% responded, of those 76, 15% responded that they plan to add another cloud in the next 12 months. So companies are starting to use 2, if not 3 public clouds to handle all of their workloads. The growth in the past, the growth of multi-cloud has really been somewhat organic, meaning different departments have chosen to do different projects on different clouds. But now we're seeing a real purposeful move to multi-cloud. The analysts are recommending companies that they manage this through a center of excellence. They centrally manage the strategy in terms of using multiple clouds and control the spend. So we're seeing this more and more where companies are starting to use best of breed products on purpose-built clouds. Oracle obviously has had a tremendous amount of success with all the data points that Michael provided around converged database and bringing that into the cloud. We offer a very compelling use case for running and managing data on OCI and then connecting that data to an app tier on another cloud. Brings us to the last point here. The data integration between clouds is the fastest growing use case within a multi-cloud environment. You can see that 49% said, hey, we do multi-cloud, but we're only doing apps that are siloed in different clouds. That is an indicator of the past organically grown multi-cloud where different people are doing different projects in different clouds. But number 2, and the fastest growing, is data integration between clouds. So companies are really thinking through how are they moving data from one cloud to another? Where are they managing the data? We're finally at that point where companies can begin to move their most important critical workloads, such as data, into the public cloud and feel comfortable about it. So this is kind of sets the stage for the next couple of slides here. So a lot of different trends going on there. We are seeing this in our customer base as well. So OCI is committed to embracing multi-cloud. We want to be the most interoperable cloud in the planet. We want to be very open, and we want to embrace the idea of running our workloads and connecting those over the network to another cloud. We ultimately envision that 100% of OCI customers will be in a multi-cloud environment. The database supports it. Now, how do we connect the 2 clouds together is what we'll spend some time on in this slide deck. So who's using our multi-cloud architecture? If we look at the current OCI customers, Many of our top 100 revenue producing companies are leveraging our Azure Interconnect, which is our unique partnership with Microsoft, or leveraging one of our Fast Connect partners to connect to some other cloud. These are often our most important customers, some of our biggest well-known customers that are leveraging our most important products, things like Exadata, to run their most critical workloads. So multi-cloud is really taken hold on the larger companies that are customers with Oracle. A large percentage of these companies are all Exadata customers. That seems to be a real value proposition for companies. So they have used Exadata for some time. They appreciate the performance gains, and some of which that Mike talked about. They appreciate the value of Exadata and running Oracle database on Exadata, and they're reluctant to give that up. So as they have moved into the cloud, and oftentimes have moved to use an app tier on some other cloud, they want to stay connected to Exadata. And that's either connecting to Exadata on-prem, connecting it in a hybrid database situation where they co-locate an Exadata instance in a colo, like an Equinix, or connecting over the Azure Interconnect or one of our Fast Connect partners. We also see a large percentage of our customers using Oracle Analytic Cloud. So that's a very big draw for companies, as well as all of our apps, of course. Who's using it in terms of verticals? We see multi-cloud scenarios being deployed across all verticals in all regions. ISVs, of course, are a very big user of OCI, and we see a lot of them that are using operating in a multi-cloud environment. Financial services, retail, healthcare, all of these verticals are well represented as choosing to run preferred database products like the Oracle product on OCI connected to apps on some other CSP. So how are these people connecting to the OCI cloud? So as I mentioned, 100% of the customers we expect to be multi-cloud. So a lot of our effort has been around simplifying and making it as easy as possible for companies to connect the Oracle cloud to other CSPs. A large number of our customers are using just simply site-to-site VPN connection to go from their on-prem site into Oracle. This is obviously readily available. Oftentimes these companies already have existing long-term contracts with things like AT&T or some providers like that. It's relatively cheap. And if you're not too concerned about performance, about latency, this is definitely an option to go. And we see a lot of people just simply doing site-to-site VPN connection. The public cloud, as you know, is a long tail business. So the majority of our customers are running site-to-site VPN connection. However, with that said, think about the biggest companies that are using OCI, the ones that are putting mission critical applications. They're connecting our database to a front end application that might be doing all of the ticket processing for an airline, or all of the e-commerce processing in some custom app that is running on some other cloud. But they want to make sure that all of that data, all those pieces of data that's created from a transaction, is sent in a secure manner, in a very low latency performance, over to OCI and running in the Oracle database. For that, we have the very unique partnership with Microsoft. So the OCI Azure Interconnect provides a private, secure, physical connection between Oracle's cage and Microsoft's cage. So this provides a very fat pipe that gives very low latency, so you can connect at very high speeds between the Oracle cloud and the Microsoft cloud. It's as good as being local to one of the clouds independently. Very low latency. Our internal goal is to always provide somewhere around 2 milliseconds in this connection. We've also developed a collaborative support agreement with Microsoft. So support tickets that are opened on one cloud provider's support arrangement would be seamlessly transferred to the other one, and we can both collaboratively support it. We want to avoid any type of finger pointing. And it's extremely easy to set up. You can go into the console of OCI and choose the Fast Connect Microsoft partner, or you could go into the Azure console and choose the ExpressRoute Oracle Oracle option. So a lot of our bigger companies are choosing this relationship to take advantage of a really unique partnership that we have in the cloud space with Microsoft. The third option is to go with one of our Fast Connect partners. So we're going to talk about Equinix today, which is a premier Fast Connect partner. They can offer advantages above and beyond the Azure Interconnect, whereas the Azure Interconnect is a pairing within a specific region. A partner like Equinix has broad geographic reach. They can reach anywhere, they can connect you, they can connect in a very secure manner, and they can connect to any CSP that you can think of, as well as other ISV partners as well. So much more reach within Equinix for Fast Connect, and that's the way that a lot of our customers are going. And we'll talk about that. So digging into Azure for a second, the agreement between Oracle and Microsoft is a long-term agreement. It has significant executive commitment on both sides. I think we both see this as a very strategically, competitive advantage that we have out in the marketplace, being a one-of-a-kind partnership with a collaborative support agreement. And we've also unified our identity access management as well within the Azure product. So if you are in Azure and you want to manipulate a resource within OCI, that unified experience has already been created for you. But to sum it up, it's a direct, secure, private, high-speed connection that has no intermediary involved. So this is a line that it goes between Oracle Cloud and Azure Cloud. It's owned by us. There is no intermediary in between. So now the primary use cases is noted by these interconnect customers that we currently have. So we launched this in 2019. What customers are telling us is the primary reason why they're using the interconnect are two. One is a split stack architecture, meaning somebody is running, let's say, the Oracle e-business suite on Azure, and it's connecting over this interconnect to the database running on OCI. EBS, PeopleSoft, Hyperion, JD Edwards, Retail Management Suite, all of those products are certified on Azure, and they're all perfectly capable of connecting over the internet to the Oracle database running in Azure, in OCI. A second primary use case that customers are reporting is this multi-cloud data analytic pipeline. So a full third of the respondents responded that, yes, this is why we're doing the interconnect. We are collecting data from various sources, like an ERP system or a front-end cloud-native app. We're collecting that data and we're sending it over this interconnect to do our analytic processing at night. And this interconnect is saving us a tremendous amount of time because we're going from cloud to cloud in a very low latency manner. So that's a primary use case that we want to focus on. The Oracle database, and oftentimes we get asked, is this a good fit for the Oracle database? Note that the Oracle database has been around for a long time. In fact, it was first released in an era of very low networking speeds. It is well suited to operating in this manner, operating with connectivity across a line to another cloud. This scenario of Azure to OCI is great for OLTP. It's great for analytics. It's great for a whole manner of workloads that you might want to use the Oracle database for. So where are we connected? We are currently connected in eight regions around the world. So in the US, we're connected in Ashburn, San Jose, and we are launching a new region in Phoenix in November of 2021. We're also connected up in Toronto, and then moving over to Europe. We are connected in London, Amsterdam, and Frankfurt, as well as Venado down in Latin America. And in APAC, we are connected currently in Tokyo, but we have many more planned. And this is a big part of our job, is to evaluate where we physically located that we can get the 2 milliseconds of latency. So we look for close proximity between the Azure data center and the Oracle data center, and then we try to build the interconnect from that, including taking into account any type of customer demand. Taking a look at a reference for the Azure Interconnect, let's take a look at Integra Life Sciences. This is a relatively new customer for the Interconnect, although they are a longtime Oracle customer. And I've put a link here for their blog post that we really recently published around their use case. Very interesting, where they've been a longtime ERP customer of Oracle's. They run EBS across the entire organization, of course, backended by the Oracle database. They are also an Azure first company, meaning any net new application is written in .NET and runs on Azure. They also do all of their analytics in Power BI. So at one point they were connecting the Oracle database and EBS running on-prem to their Azure environment, going over the public internet. The processing time for that was prohibitive. So moving EBS and the Oracle database into XSCS on OCI and allowing themselves to connect over this interconnect directly to the Azure Power BI instance dramatically decreased their analytic processing window from 8.5 hours down to 3.5 hours. So a significant cost savings. It's a great use case for us, and I would highly encourage anyone to take a look at that blog post. Now let's take a look at Equinix. So transferring out of that, so we have the unique relationship with Microsoft. We also have a relationship with Equinix, so one of our premier Fast Connect partners. Equinix is, I should note that they have over 10,000 enterprise customers. Now they're offering low latency, a private, secure connectivity, and really an easy, fast implementation to connect to not just Oracle, but to any cloud out there. So we see Equinix as a real enabler towards the multi-cloud environment. Once you get into the Equinix platform, from there, using either your own networking hardware that you bring to Equinix or their software-defined WAN that they offer to their customers, you can connect to any CSP out there, including OCI, as well as any of their SaaS or ISV partners as well. So a very large ecosystem that you have access to. You can make these connections through their console in a very quick manner. Another one of the advantages with Equinix is just simply their size. So they reach across the world. They have over 200 data centers around the world and many more on-ramps into the cloud. A lot of their areas are enabled to access the OCI cloud very simply, and we'll take a look at one of the data centers here, but just simply the breadth of reach that they offer is very, very impressive. And here's an example of a customer. This is a large pharmaceutical company down in LA. As you noticed, they were a large Oracle ERP system, but they also have production workloads in AWS. So they are connecting from the OCI Phoenix region into our Fast Connect enabled POP in Los Angeles, so the Oracle Cloud Los Angeles Fast Connect location. And that is in an Equinix site, and they're on the fabric, and they are then connecting to AWS in Silicon Valley. This is a very typical use case that we're seeing in the multi-cloud environment with working with Fast Connect partners, connecting very simply between the OCI cloud and AWS cloud. A third and final Fast Connect partner that I'll talk about is Megaport. So we have the Azure Interconnect. We have Fast Connect from Equinix, which for their breadth. We also have Megaport as well. So Megaport is a little bit different from Equinix in terms of they've abstracted themselves even another layer above from owning a colo. So Megaport has 2,200 plus enterprise customers and 170 OCI customers. And they are competing with Equinix on price and breadth of on-ramps, but everything is software defined. So there's no colo that's underpinning Megaport. They're going into the data center providers, enabling those data center providers to access the OCI cloud, becoming Megaport enabled. And very simply, once you become a Megaport customer, you can go into their console and very quickly set up these connections between different CSPs. Highly recommend that you take a look at both Megaport and Equinix, as well as evaluate the OCI to Azure Interconnect. A case study with Megaport is one of our favorite case studies here at Oracle, which is OceanX, which is an e-commerce company. OceanX is a long-time Oracle customer. They've been running Oracle databases. They previously used AWS's RDS to manage their Oracle database. Since then, they've chosen to move their Oracle database into OCI, but they remain connected to AWS via Megaport. This is because all of their e-commerce apps that are running on AWS are creating the content, creating that data, and then sending that data through the Megaport connection to OCI's database at night to run any number of analytics or to store and manage the data. So another fantastic customer use case. We have a blog post out there as well as several videos on OceanX that I would encourage you to take a look at. That just about wraps it up on the multi-cloud use cases. I'm going to turn it back over to Michael to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Mike, for that overview about Oracle's multi-cloud capabilities. For those of you interested in digging deeper into Oracle's multi-cloud capabilities, I encourage you to search for Mike's Database World presentation, Multi-Cloud Cost Optimization with Oracle Database Cloud. In that presentation, he'll get into the details on how you can embrace the multi-cloud movement and connect to any cloud provider you want to while keeping your data management in the Oracle Database Cloud. So, the key takeaways from this presentation. Optimization is a design requirement and not an afterthought. To get the most value out of the efforts you put into your data-rooted initiatives, you design with long-term data optimization in mind. Oracle's converged database perspective optimizes data management activities and allows your team to focus on innovation and not integration. Oracle Database Cloud is the best way to optimize your converged database deployments, no matter what kind of workload you have. And the combination of Oracle's converged database perspective and Oracle Database Cloud optimizes the value of your most valuable asset, your data capital. Just like our Unicommer example, more information, faster, enabling the business to more rapidly act at significantly lower cost. And finally, Oracle's multi-cloud capabilities optimize developer flexibility by allowing you to design an architecture that retains the data management optimization of a converged database in the Oracle Database Cloud while giving your developers the flexibility to build and deploy apps anywhere in any cloud. And that's it. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. We hope you continue to check out our other Database World presentations to learn more about Oracle and how we can help you to make all of your initiatives successful. Thank you very much.